The Resonance Between Us episode 14 Breakups as Ego Death, Loss, Withdrawal, and Identity Reconstruction. Hello, and welcome to The Resonance Between Us, a This Place Called Earth series exploring love, language, nervous systems, and the hidden architecture of human connection. In episode 1, The Signal Before Words, we explored the first subtle movement of attraction, the possibility that connection begins before language catches up. Before the confession, before the label, before the story, something in the body may already be noticing, responding, and orienting towards another person. In episode 2, Mate Choice, we explored what desire may be selecting for beneath conscious preference. Biology, evolutionary inheritance, cultural conditioning, memory, status, projection, and nervous system recognition all begin to participate in what we call attraction. We asked whether attraction is always as free as it feels, and whether what we call my type may reveal both desire and history. In episode 3, The Nervous System of Love, we moved into attachment, regulation, and emotional safety. We explored how love does not live only in romance or feeling, but also in the body's learned expectations around closeness. Some people regulate us, some activate us, some feel safe because they help the nervous system soften. Others feel addictive because they awaken uncertainty, pursuit, and old emotional survival patterns. In episode 4, The Mirror Effect, we explored projection, reflection, hidden recognition, and how another person can reveal what is still unconscious within us. We looked at how attraction can become a mirror, how recognition can be resonance or memory, and how the person we desire may not only show us who they are, but what they awaken in us. In episode 5, Orbiting, we explored attention fields, presence, interpersonal gravity, and the way attraction can form as a field before it becomes contact. We looked at how attention becomes charged, how people can occupy awareness before anything is spoken, and how orbiting may be biological, psychological, digital, symbolic, spiritual, or all of these at once. In episode 6, Alpha, Beta, Sigma, we explored archetypes, masculinity, identity construction, and the roles people perform inside the field of attraction. We looked beneath the labels and asked whether dominance is always strength, whether detachment is always sovereignty, and whether softness is really weakness, or whether many of these roles are nervous system strategies shaped into cultural identity. In episode 7, The Red Pill Consciousness, we explored gender narratives, pain, algorithmic polarization, and how relational wounds can become ideology. We looked at how rejection can become resentment, how cynicism can be mistaken for truth, and how a wounded nervous system can begin calling its armor awakening. In episode 8, Chemistry, we explored neurobiology, addiction, hormonal bonding, and the way the body can become hooked through desire, reward, uncertainty, and emotional charge. We looked at how chemistry can feel like truth because the body believes it before the mind can explain it, and how conscious love asks us not to worship the spark, but to understand what the spark is teaching us. In episode 9, Entanglement, we explored resonance, synchronicity, conscious connection, and the way meaning can move through memory, symbol, intuition, timing, and field. We asked how to honor mystery without abandoning discernment, and how to feel connection without forcing it to become destiny. In episode 10, The Body Keeps the Bond, we explored somatics, touch, emotional memory, and how relationships become encoded in the body through rhythm, absence, imprint, and sensory association. We looked at why the mind may know a bond has changed while the body is still learning how to release the rhythm it once lived inside. In episode 11, The Digital Dating Arena, we explored dating apps, parasocial desire, algorithmic attraction, validation loops, digital intimacy, AI companionship, and how technology reshapes the way attraction begins before presence has fully arrived. We looked at how a profile is not a person, a match is not a bond, and access is not the same as being truly met. In episode 12, Soulmates and Shadow Attraction, we explored destiny, projection, familiar pain, soulmate language, twin flame narratives, and the way the nervous system can mistake an old wound for fate. We asked whether what feels destined is sometimes love, sometimes meaning, and sometimes the body recognizing a pattern it has known before. In episode 13, Jealousy, Polarity, and Possession, we explored jealousy as relational threat detection, the fear of losing the bond, masculine and feminine polarity, devotion, possession, and the way fear can turn love into territory. We looked at how jealousy can reveal what feels threatened, but also how it becomes destructive when fear tries to own another person. Now we move into breakups as ego death, because if jealousy lives in the fear of losing the bond, a breakup is what happens when the loss becomes real. The bond breaks, the future changes, the body loses rhythm, the nervous system enters withdrawal, the identity organized around the relationship begins to dissolve. The self that existed inside the bond may no longer know who it is without it. This episode explores breakups not only as emotional pain, but as rupture, withdrawal, grief, identity collapse, ego death, somatic absence, and reconstruction. Because a breakup is rarely only the end of a relationship. It can be the collapse of a world, a private world, a body rhythm, a language, a routine, a future image, a version of the self that only existed in relation to that person. And when that self collapses, people often say, I do not feel like myself. But perhaps the deeper truth is this: the self they were inside the relationship has died, and the self after the relationship has not fully formed yet. So let's begin. When losing them feels like losing yourself, a breakup can feel irrational from the outside. People may say you just need to move on. They were not right for you. There are other people. Time heals. Focus on yourself. Do not let one person destroy you. Sometimes those statements are well-meaning. Sometimes they are even partly true. But when someone is in heartbreak, they can feel almost insulted in their simplicity because the pain does not feel like simply missing another person. It can feel like losing a part of reality. A breakup can remove the person, but it can also remove the rhythm that organized your days. The message in the morning, the voice at night, the body beside you, the plans you assumed were still alive, the private jokes, the routine, the imagined future, the role you played, the version of yourself that felt loved, chosen, desired, needed, witnessed, or becoming something with them. That is why losing them can feel like losing yourself. Because in deep attachment, the other person becomes woven into the nervous system's map of life. They are not only someone we think about, they become part of the body's expectation, part of how the day is shaped, part of how the future is imagined, part of how safety is felt, part of how identity is reinforced. The body learns them. Their tone, their timing, their smell, their touch, their absence and return, their name on the screen, their side of the bed, their footsteps, their moods, their silence, their presence in memory. And when the relationship ends, the mind may understand before the body does. The mind may know it is over. The mind may know they are not coming back in the same way. The mind may even know this needed to end. But the body still reaches. It reaches for the phone. It reaches for the routine. It reaches for the person in dreams. It reaches for the version of reality where they are still part of the field. This is why heartbreak often feels like withdrawal. The nervous system is not only grieving an idea, it is losing access to a source of regulation, reward, familiarity, touch, validation, and meaning. The person may have been painful. The relationship may have been imperfect. It may even have been damaging. But if the body bonded, the body still has to learn absence. And learning absence can feel brutal. One of the strangest parts of a breakup is how the world remains ordinary while the inner world collapses. People still go to work. Shops are still open. Messages still arrive. The weather still changes. The body still has to eat, sleep, move, respond, and function. But inside, something enormous has happened. A world has ended, and yet the outer world does not stop to mark it. There is no funeral for the future you imagined. No ceremony for the version of yourself that existed inside the bond. No public ritual for the death of us. So the grief becomes private. The person carries it inside ordinary life. They sit in rooms where no one knows what just collapsed. They smile when the body is aching. They answer messages while trying not to check whether the ex has been online. They pass places that still hold memory. They hear songs that suddenly become unbearable. They smell something and are pulled backwards. They see an old photograph and feel the body re-enter a world that no longer exists. This is not a weakness or lack of strength. This is the body trying to update reality. A breakup is a rupture in the map. Yesterday there was a future. Today there may not be. Yesterday the body had a person it expected. Today expectation has nowhere to land. Yesterday the self had a role, partner, lover, chosen one, caretaker, future husband, future wife, safe place, desired body, witness, home. Today that role is gone or uncertain, and when a role disappears the ego can enter crisis. By ego, I do not mean arrogance. I mean the organized sense of self, the identity structure that says, this is who I am. This is where I belong. This is where my life is going. This is who sees me. This is what I am building. This is the future I am moving towards. A relationship can become part of that structure. Not always consciously, but slowly, through repetition, attachment, imagination, and shared life. The self begins to organize around the bond. You do not only love the person, you become someone in relation to them. So when the relationship ends, the ego not only grieves them, it grieves the self it was allowed to be with them. The self that was desired. The self that was needed. The self that had a future. The self that had someone to tell. The self that belonged somewhere. The self that could imagine a life. The self that existed inside their eyes. This is why breakups can feel like ego death. Not because the entire self is destroyed, but because a version of the self dies. The version that lived inside that relational field cannot continue in the same form. The body may keep trying to return to it, but the structure is gone. The old identity has lost its mirror. And this is where heartbreak becomes so much more than sadness. It becomes disorientation. Who am I now without their attention? Who am I without our plans? Who am I without being chosen by them? Who am I if the future I imagined is no longer possible? Who am I if the person who knew me in that way is gone? Who am I when the story breaks? This is why getting over someone is often the wrong phrase. It makes heartbreak sound like an obstacle to climb over, when often it is a self that has to be reorganized. The question is not simply how to stop missing them. The question is what has to be reconstructed after their absence. The body has to reconstruct rhythm. The mind has to reconstruct meaning. The heart has to reconstruct trust. The ego has to reconstruct identity. The future has to be rewritten. And that takes time. Not because the person is weak, because attachment is real, because love leaves traces, because identity forms in relationship, because the nervous system does not release on command, because grief is not just an emotion, it is a reorganization of reality. This episode is not about romanticizing heartbreak. It is not about saying every breakup is sacred, or that suffering automatically makes us wiser. Pain can also embitter people. It can close them. It can turn into cynicism, revenge, ideology, addiction, avoidance, or emotional shutdown. But heartbreak can also become an initiation if it is metabolized rather than bypassed. It can force us to ask what part of us was built around another person. What part of us wanted them to save us? What part of us confused their presence with our worth? What part of us placed the future outside ourselves? What part of us does not yet know how to be alone without feeling abandoned? What part of us still believes that losing love means losing identity? These are not easy questions. But they are the questions that turn a breakup from mere collapse into reconstruction. Because after the bond breaks, something must be rebuilt. Not immediately, not falsely, not through pretending we are healed before the body has caught up, but slowly, through grief, through honesty, through routine, through returning to the body, through reclaiming attention, through allowing absence to be felt without making it the whole identity, through learning that a relationship can end without the self ending with it. So the opening question of this episode is not, how do I get over them? The deeper question is, what version of me was built around this bond? And what version of me is trying to be born after its collapse? The linguistic decode heartbreak, grief, loss, healing, closure, and ego. Before we move deeper into the psychology and somatic reality of breakups, we need to slow down the language. Because the words used around endings can either help us understand what is happening, or they can make the pain feel smaller than it is. Heartbreak, grief, loss, healing, closure. These words are used so often that they can become almost automatic. Someone says they are heartbroken. Someone says they are grieving. Someone says they need closure. Someone says they are healing. Someone says their ego has been hurt. But beneath those familiar words is an enormous internal process. A breakup is not only an emotional event, it is a nervous system event, a meaningful event, a body event, a future event, an identity event. And if the language is too shallow, the person may start judging themselves for not recovering quickly enough. They may think, why am I still upset? Why do I still miss them? Why does my body react when I know the relationship was not right? Why do I keep replaying it? Why do I need closure? Why do I feel like I lost myself? The reason is that the breakup has disturbed more than the conscious mind. It has disturbed the entire relational architecture. So the first word is heartbreak. In ordinary language, heartbreak usually means emotional pain after romantic loss, sadness, rejection, longing, betrayal, disappointment, the ache of missing someone, the collapse that comes when love ends, or when the person we wanted does not want us in the same way. But heartbreak is not only emotional. It is somatic, psychological, symbolic, and relational. The heart breaks not because the organ literally breaks in the poetic sense, but because the attachment field ruptures. The person who carried meaning, rhythm, comfort, touch, desire, familiarity, future, or identity is no longer available in the same way. And when that availability disappears, the body reacts. Heartbreak can feel like pressure in the chest, heaviness in the stomach, tightness in the throat, a hollow ache in the body, restlessness, exhaustion, anxiety, insomnia, nausea, appetite changes, sudden waves of panic, or the strange physical pain of absence. It can feel as though the body is trying to reach for something that is no longer there. That is why the phrase heartbreak is so powerful. It names more than sadness. It names the body's experience of rupture. The deeper frame is this. Heartbreak is not only the pain of losing someone, it is the body and psyche responding to the rupture of a bond that had become part of the inner world. That bond may have been healthy or unhealthy. It may have been mutual or unequal. It may have been safe or chaotic. But if the body is attached, the body still has to metabolize the ending. This is why someone can be heartbroken after leaving a relationship that was damaging. The mind may know the ending was necessary, but the body still grieves the rhythm, the hope, the familiar pattern, the fantasy of what it could have become, or the part of the self that was organized around it. Heartbreak is not always proof that the relationship should continue. Sometimes it is proof that attachment has to be released slowly. This distinction matters. If heartbreak is interpreted as evidence that the person was the one, then grief can become a reason to return to the wound. But if heartbreak is understood as the body's response to attachment rupture, then the pain can be honored without being made into instruction. The second word is grief. Grief is often associated with death. And in some ways that is appropriate because a breakup contains many small deaths. The death of the relationship, the death of the future imagined through it, the death of routines, the death of shared language, the death of being someone's person, the death of a private world, the death of a version of yourself. But grief is not only sadness. Grief is reorganization. It is the body and psyche trying to update around a reality that no longer contains what they had bonded with. The person is no longer there in the same way. The contact is no longer available. The future is no longer reliable. The old map no longer works. Grief is what happens while the system tries to build a new map. This is why grief comes in waves. It is not linear because the body does not update reality all at once. One moment, the mind knows the relationship is over. The next moment, something triggers the old map, a song, a smell, a place, a time of day, an old message, a memory, a body sensation, a holiday, a photograph, the sound of someone's name. Suddenly, the system re-enters the old reality. The person is gone again, freshly gone, even if the breakup happened weeks, months, or years before. Grief is not failure to heal. Grief is the process of reality being learned at deeper and deeper levels. The deeper frame is this. Grief is the body and psyche reorganizing around a reality that no longer contains what they had attached to, expected, or loved. This is why people can intellectually accept an ending long before they emotionally or somatically accept it. The mind can say, it is over. The body may say, where are they? The mind can say, they were not good for me. The nervous system may say, but they were familiar. The mind can say, I need to move forward. The heart may say, but the future I imagine still hurts. Grief asks for patience because it is not only about understanding, it is about integration. Integration takes longer than explanation. The third word is loss. Loss seems obvious. Someone is gone. A relationship has ended. A person is no longer available. A role has been removed. A future has changed. But loss is layered. In breakups, people often think they are only grieving the person, but usually they are grieving much more than that. They are grieving the person, yes, but also the routines around them, the daily contact, the touch, the messages, the shared jokes, the emotional role, the imagined future, the family system that may have formed around the relationship, the home, the mutual friends, the places that belong to the bond, the sexual rhythm, the identity of being partnered, the feeling of being chosen, the version of themselves they were when they were loved by that person. This is why breakup pain can be confusing. The person may ask, do I miss them or do I miss who I was with them? Do I miss the relationship or the future I imagined? Do I miss love or do I miss not being alone? Do I miss the real person or the projection? Do I miss their presence or the role I had in their life? Loss includes the visible and the invisible. The visible loss is the person. The invisible loss is the architecture built around them. The deeper frame is this: loss includes the person, but also the routines, identity, imagined futures, sensory rhythms, emotional patterns, roles, and meanings that were built around the relationship. That is why a breakup can feel like a house collapsing. It is not one object being removed. It is an entire structure losing a central beam. The person may have held part of the emotional roof. Their presence may have organized the room. Their role may have made the future feel shaped. When they disappear, the structure has to be rebuilt. This does not mean the other person was responsible for our entire identity. It means relationships naturally become architecture. They create patterns. And when patterns break, there is loss at multiple levels. A person may also grieve who they were trying to become through the relationship. Perhaps they imagined becoming a husband, wife, parent, healer, safe partner, chosen one, rescuer, family member, love body, stable person, or someone finally beyond the old wounds. The breakup can feel like losing that becoming. This is why loss after a breakup can include grief for a self that never fully arrived. The fourth word is healing. Healing is one of the most overused and misunderstood words around breakups. In modern culture, healing is often treated as moving on, becoming okay again, glowing up, dating someone better, regaining confidence, feeling nothing, or proving that the breakup did not destroy us. But healing is not emotional amnesia. Healing does not mean the person never mattered. It does not mean the body never reacts. It does not mean you never miss them. It does not mean you erase the bond, delete the past, become detached instantly, or transform pain into empowerment before grief has been felt. The deeper frame is this: healing is not erasing the bond. It is integrating what happened without remaining governed by the wound. Integration is different from forgetting. Forgetting tries to remove the experience. Integration allows the experience to become part of the story without controlling the whole story. It means the relationship can be remembered without constantly reopening the wound. It means the lessons can be carried without the self remaining trapped in blame, longing, fantasy, or collapse. It means the person can matter without being the center of the nervous system. Healing may include missing some with tenderness rather than desperation. It may include remembering the good without denying the harm. It may include grieving the fantasy without hating yourself for believing in it. It may include accepting that some questions will never be answered. It may include slowly rebuilding routines, identity, trust, desire, and the capacity to imagine a future again. Healing is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet, eating properly again, sleeping through a night, not checking their profile, walking past a place and only aching slightly, listening to a song without collapsing, realizing you have not thought about them for a few hours, feeling desire for life to return in small ways, laughing without guilt, remembering yourself. Healing is often the nervous system learning that life continues without the old bond as its center, but healing cannot be forced through performance. This matters because modern culture often turns healing into another identity. People feel pressure to appear healed, unbothered, empowered, attractive, productive, and emotionally above the pain. But if healing becomes a performance, grief may be pushed underground. The wound may not disappear. It may simply become more hidden. True healing allows grief to move. It allows anger, sadness, relief, confusion, longing, regret, tenderness, resentment, and emptiness to be processed without turning any one of them into a permanent home. Healing asks, what needs to be felt? What needs to be understood? What needs to be released? What needs to be reclaimed? What needs to be rebuilt? The fifth word is closure. Closure is one of the most sought after things after a breakup, and one of the most elusive. People often imagine closure as a final conversation, a full explanation, an apology, a confession, a moment where everything finally makes sense. They want the missing information. They want the other person to say why. Why did it happen? Why did you change? Did you ever love me? Was it real? Was there someone else? What did I mean to you? Could it have been different? Was I not enough? The hunger for closure is understandable because the nervous system struggles with unresolved loops. An unclear ending leaves the mind searching. If the story has no final shape, the mind keeps trying to complete it. It replays conversations, detects clues, revises memories, imagines alternate outcomes, rehearses what should have been said, and tries to solve the breakup like a mystery. But sometimes closure never arrives in the form we want. The other person may not be honest. They may not understand themselves. They may not have the emotional capacity to explain. They may avoid accountability. They may give answers that create more confusion. They may say things that protect their ego rather than reveal the truth. They may never return. They may never apologize. They may never understand the impact they had. This is painful because the mind wants the person who hurt us or left us to become the person who helps us make sense of the injury. But they may not be capable of that. The deeper frame is this. Closure is often less about receiving the perfect answer and more about the nervous system learning how to live without the unresolved loop. This does not mean conversations are useless. A good conversation can help. Honesty can help. Apologies can help. Clarity can help. But healing cannot depend entirely on someone else becoming clear, kind, accountable, or emotionally mature. Sometimes closure becomes an internal act. Not because the questions do not matter, but because life cannot remain paused until every answer arrives. Internal closure may sound like, I may never know everything, but I know enough to stop abandoning myself. I may never get the apology I wanted, but I can still honor what happened. I may never understand their choices fully, but I can understand the impact on me. I may never receive the conversation that settles my body, but I can stop using the absence of closure as a reason to keep the wound open. Closure is not always a door being gently shut by both people. Sometimes it is learning to stop standing in the doorway. The sixth word is ego. Ego is often misunderstood as arrogance, pride, vanity, or the part of us that wants to win. And in breakup dynamics, ego can certainly appear in those ways. It may want revenge. It may want to appear unbothered. It may want the ex to suffer. It may want to prove value by moving on quickly. It may be chosen again simply to restore power. It may want to win the breakup. But ego also means something deeper, the organized sense of me. The structure of identity that says who I am, where I belong, what role I play, what future I am moving towards, and what story I am living inside. In a relationship, the ego can become structured around the bond. I am their partner. I am loved by them. I am desired by them. I am building a future with them. I am the person they call. I am the one who knows them. I am the one who is chosen. I am part of an us. When the relationship ends, that ego structure can collapse. The person is not only grieving the other, they are grieving the role, the identity, the relational self, the future self, the version of me that existed inside we. This is why a breakup can feel humiliating, destabilizing, or annihilating. The ego loses its mirror. It loses a source of confirmation. It loses the story it was organizing around. It has to ask, who am I now? The deeper frame is this. Ego is the organized sense of self that can become structured around a relationship, role, future, and relational identity. Ego death in a breakup does not necessarily mean spiritual enlightenment. It often feels like disorientation. The old self is no longer sustainable, but the new self has not yet formed. There is a void between identities. The person may not recognize themselves. They may feel empty, exposed, ashamed, lost, or unanchored. But this is also where reconstruction begins. If the ego is too fused with the relationship, the breakup reveals that fusion. If worth was too dependent on being chosen, the breakup exposes that dependency. If identity was built around being needed, the breakup reveals the role. If the future were outsourced to another person, the breakup forces the future back into our own hands. This is painful, but it can become transformative. Not because pain is automatically wise, but because the collapse reveals what was built. So when we bring these words together, heartbreak, grief, loss, healing, closure, and ego, we begin to see the deeper reality of breakups. Heartbreak is the body and psyche responding to attachment rupture. Grief is reality being reorganized after the bond is gone. Loss includes not only the person, but the world built around them. Healing is integration, not erasure. Closure is learning to live without the unresolved loop. The ego is the identity structure that may collapse when the relational self dies. This linguistic shift changes how we treat heartbreak. Instead of saying, why am I not over them? We might ask, what part of my body is still learning absence? Instead of saying, why do I need closure? We might ask, what unresolved loop is my nervous system trying to complete? Instead of saying, why did this destroy me? We might ask, what version of myself was organized around this bond? Instead of saying, I must forget them to heal, we might ask, how do I integrate what happened without remaining governed by it? Instead of saying, I lost them, we might ask, what else did I lose when the relationship ended? Breakup language focuses on losing the other person, but the deeper rupture is also the loss of the relational self. The self that was touched, chosen, mirrored, needed, desired, regulated, or imagined through the bond. And when that self dies, grief is not weakness. It is the process of becoming real again outside the structure that once held us. That is why this episode uses the language of ego death, not to dramatize heartbreak, but to honor its depth. Because sometimes the breakup does not only ask us to release another person. Sometimes it asks us to rebuild the self that forgot how to exist without them. The scientific and psychological layer, attachment withdrawal, grief and identity disruption when a breakup happens. People often try to understand the pain through thought. They ask what went wrong, who was responsible, whether it could have been different, whether they should reach out, whether the other person still cares, whether the relationship was real, whether the ending is final, whether closure is possible, and whether the love meant what they thought it meant. The mind begins to analyze because analysis feels like control. If we can understand the breakup, perhaps we can reduce the pain. If we can find the exact moment it changed, perhaps we can undo it. If we can identify the reason, perhaps the body will stop aching. If we can explain the loss clearly enough, perhaps the nervous system will accept it. But heartbreak does not live only in the thinking mind. It lives in the attachment system. It lives in memory. It lives in the body. It lives in a daily rhythm. It lives in the brain's reward pathways, in the nervous system's expectation of contact, in the sensory traces of touch, voice, smell, location, and routine. It lives in the identity that formed around the bond. So when the relationship ends, the pain is not simply emotional. It is biological, psychological, somatic, and existential. This is why a breakup can feel so destabilizing even when the conscious mind agrees with the ending. The first layer is attachment withdrawal. When someone becomes an attachment figure, the body starts organizing around their presence. Their voice may soothe. Their message may be regulated. Their touch may calm. Their attention may be affirmed. Their routine may structure the day. Their availability may become part of the body's map of safety. Even conflict can become part of the rhythm. Even instability can become familiar. The nervous system does not only bond with peace, it bonds with repetition. So when the bond breaks, the attachment system does not simply switch off. It continues reaching. This reaching can appear as craving, checking, dreaming, remembering, longing, replaying conversations, wanting to hear their voice, to see their face, wanting to send one more message, wanting to look at old photographs, wanting to ask one more question, wanting to know whether they are thinking of us. The body may know the relationship is over, but the attachment system is still searching for the person it associated with regulation, reward, identity, or familiarity. This is one reason no contact can feel so brutal. It is not only silence. It is the removal of the channel through which the nervous system is expected to regulate. The phone becomes a site of absence. The lack of notification becomes a signal. The body checks before the mind can stop it. It opens the screen, looks for the name, notices the silence, and feels the loss again. This is not a weakness. It is a withdrawal from an attachment rhythm. The second layer is the neurochemical crash. During attraction, bonding, sexual intimacy, emotional closeness, and relational routine, the body can become organized around reward and connection. Dopamine, oxytocin, stress hormones, sexual chemistry, anticipation, comfort, and habit all play roles in the experience of bonding. In earlier episodes, especially chemistry and the body keeps the bond, we explored how desire, reward, uncertainty, touch, and emotional memory can shape the body's attachment to another person. A breakup disrupts all of that once. The source of reward is gone. The source of comfort is gone. The expected contact is gone. The familiar rhythm is gone. The body may enter something that feels very similar to withdrawal. Anxiety, agitation, insomnia, appetite changes, obsessive thought, emotional swings, panic waves, heaviness, physical ache, restlessness, fatigue, or the compulsive urge to re-establish contact. This is why people sometimes do things after a breakup that they later do not recognize. They send messages they wish they had not sent. They check profiles they promised not to check. They reread old conversations even though it hurts. They drive past places. They look for signs. They ask mutual friends. They search for meaning in small digital traces. The body is trying to reconnect with the source it lost. If the relationship was intermittent, chaotic, addictive, or unresolved, the withdrawal can be even stronger. Because the nervous system may not only be missing love, it may be missing the cycle, the high after distance, the relief after uncertainty, the message after silence, the reconnection after rupture, the chemistry after conflict, the hope after despair. If the relationship operated through intermittent reinforcement, the breakup can feel like the final removal of the reward the body had been trained to chase. This is why some painful relationships are harder to release than steady ones. The nervous system becomes addicted to relief, not simply love. When the person leaves, the body may crave the return, not because the relationship was safe, but because the cycle has not been completed. The organism wants the soothing that used to come after activation. It wants the familiar restoration. It wants the hit of being chosen again. That craving can be misread as destiny, but often it is withdrawal. This brings us grief as reorganization. Grief is not just sadness. It is the nervous system updating its map of reality. The person is no longer available in the same way. The future no longer contains the same image. The daily rhythm no longer includes the same contact. The identity no longer has the same mirror. The body must learn what the mind may already know. They are gone, or they are no longer yours, or the relationship is no longer alive in the form it was. That learning takes time because the body learns through repetition. Every morning without the message teaches absence. Every night without the voice teaches absence. Every routine without them teaches absence. Every place that once held them now teaches absence. Every plan that disappears teaches absence. Every moment where the body reaches and finds nothing teaches absence. This is why grief comes in waves. The map is not updated all at once. It is updated through repeated encounters with reality. You may feel strong one day and then collapse the next because something touched the old map. A song, a smell, a photograph, a date, a phrase, a season, a memory, a dream. Suddenly the body returns to the relationship as if it is still happening, and then the loss arrives again. This can feel like going backwards, but it is often grief moving deeper. The mind understood first. Now the body is learning. This is also why grief can feel physically exhausting. The nervous system is doing heavy work. It is revising expectation. It is a metabolizing absence. It is trying to reconcile what was with what is. It is trying to make a new map without the person at the center of it. Then there is identity disruption. Relationships become part of identity in subtle ways. Even independent people can become relationally shaped. You become someone's partner, someone's lover, someone's safe place, someone's future, someone's person, someone's witness, someone's daily contact, someone's emergency call, someone's plan, someone's home. You may become the caretaker, the desired one, the rescuer, the protected one, the one who finally found love, the one who is healing through the relationship, the one who is building a future, the one who has made it out of loneliness, the one who is no longer alone. When the relationship ends, those identities may collapse. This can be shocking because the person may have believed they were only losing the other, but they are also losing the version of themselves that existed through the other's eyes, the self that was reflected in the bond, the self that felt chosen because this person chose them, the self that felt valuable because this person desired them, the self that felt purposeful because this person needed them, the self that felt safe because the future had a shape. This is why the question, who am I now, becomes so real after a breakup. Who am I without being their partner? Who am I without our future? Who am I without being loved by them? Who am I without having someone to report my life to? Who am I without the role I played in their world? Who am I when the mirror is gone? This is not vanity. It is identity reorganization. The ego had arranged itself around a relational structure, and now that structure has collapsed. The self has to form new coordinates. It has to learn where it belongs, what it wants, how it moves, what it values, how it regulates, how it imagines the future, and how it experiences worth outside the relationship. This is especially intense if the relationship carried a redemptive meaning. Perhaps the person represented healing from childhood. Perhaps they represented finally being chosen. Perhaps they represented proof that love was possible. Perhaps they represented escape from loneliness, family pain, sexual shame, abandonment wounds, or past betrayal. If the relationship ends, the pain may not only be, I lost them. It may be, the proof disappeared, the rescue failed. The story I needed collapsed. The future that was going to heal me is gone. This is why breakups can touch the inner child so deeply. The adult may know the relationship ends. The adult may understand incompatibility, timing, betrayal, immaturity, or changing needs. But the younger emotional self may hear something more primal. I was not chosen. I was left. I was not enough. I am alone again. The person who feels like safety is gone. The future I clung to has disappeared. This can create emotional regression. Someone may feel younger than they are, more desperate, more frightened, more abandoned, more dependent, more unable to self-soothe. They may feel ashamed of that, but it is often the younger wound being activated by adult loss. The breakup becomes present pain and old pain at the same time. This also explains why people obsess after breakups. The mind is not only replaying because it is irrational. It is trying to solve an identity threat and attachment rupture. It tries to answer, why did this happen? What did I miss? Could I have prevented it? Was I loved? Was I deceived? Did I matter? Will they come back? Are they happier without me? Have they replaced me? Was everything real? The mind replays because uncertainty is painful. It searches for a cause because a cause feels like power. If I can understand the cause, maybe I can prevent this from happening again. If I can identify my mistake, maybe I can fix it. If I can prove they still care, maybe the bond is not fully dead. If I can find the truth, maybe the body will stop aching. But obsessive loops often do not resolve grief. They can keep the attachment system active. Each replay re-enters the bond. Each analysis reanimates the person. Each search for hidden meaning keeps the relationship alive inside the nervous system. This does not mean reflection is bad. Reflection is necessary. But there is a difference between reflection and looping. Reflection moves towards understanding. Looping moves around the wound. Reflection asks, what did this teach me? Looping asks, how can I undo the pain? Reflection eventually returns energy to the self. Looping keeps energy attached to the absent person. Part of healing is learning when analysis is serving integration and when it is keeping the attachment alive. Future image death is another crucial layer. When a relationship ends, the future imagined through that relationship often dies too. This is sometimes more painful than people realize. The person may not only grieve what happened, they grieve what will now never happen. The home, the family, the children, the marriage, the shared work, the travels, the healing, the redemption, the old age image, the version of Christmas, birthdays, mornings, ordinary life, and future identity that had quietly become emotionally real. An imagined future can be deeply bonded even if it never happens. The body can grieve the possibility. This is why people sometimes say, I am not just grieving them. I am grieving the life I thought we were going to have. That future may have existed only in imagination, but imagination is nothing. The nervous system rehearsed it. The heart invested in it. The self shaped itself towards it. When the relationship ends, that future collapses like a bridge the person was already walking across. Now they have to stop mid-air and build another path. This can feel terrifying because the future is part of regulation. Human beings do not only live in the present. We live through anticipated continuity. We need some sense of where life is going. A breakup can remove that continuity. It can turn the future blank. And blankness can feel like annihilation to a nervous system that had organized around a shared life. This is where withdrawal and identity disruption become existential. The pain is not only, I miss them. It is, I do not know what happens now. I do not know who I am becoming. I do not know where my love goes. I do not know what to do with the future that still lives inside me, but no longer has a place to land. The body may continue carrying love after the relationship has ended. This can be one of the most difficult parts. Love does not always stop when contact stops. Desire does not always stop when a decision is made. Memory does not stop because the relationship is over. The heart may still feel tenderness, longing, anger, care, grief, resentment, attraction, and love in changing waves. This can confuse people. They think that if the relationship was wrong, the love should vanish. Or if the person hurt them, missing them means they are weak. Or if they still care, it means they should return. But emotional reality is more complex. A person can love someone and still know the relationship cannot continue. A person can miss someone and still choose not to go back. A person can grieve someone harmful. A person can feel attachment without it being a command. This is part of emotional maturity, learning to feel without obeying every feeling. The body may reach, but the conscious self can hold the boundary. The heart may miss, but the adult self can remember the whole truth. The nervous system may crave contact, but the deeper self can choose integration over repetition. This is especially important when breakups follow toxic, chaotic, or abusive dynamics. The withdrawal can be strong precisely because the bond was unstable. The person may mistake the strength of the withdrawal for the strength of the love. But sometimes the nervous system is detoxing from intensity, not mourning healthy intimacy. It is grieving the cycle, the hope, the occasional tenderness, the fantasy, the role, and the intermittent relief. This does not make the pain less real. It makes it more understandable. Another important layer is memory reconsolidation. After a breakup, memory becomes unstable in strange ways. Some days the mind remembers only the beautiful moments. Other days it remembers only the harm. Some days the person seems irreplaceable. On other days the relationship looks clearly impossible. The mind shifts because it is trying to reorganize the story. This can be exhausting. The person may not know which version is true. Was it love? Was it attachment? Was it manipulation? Was it incompatibility? Was I blind? Was I too harsh? Did I lose something precious? Did I escape something damaging? Often the answer is mixed. Relationships are rarely one thing. There may have been love and harm, beauty and dysfunction, real tenderness and real incompatibility, chemistry and insecurity, growth and repetition. This complexity makes grief harder because the mind wants a clean category. It wants either they were my person or they were terrible. But integration often requires holding the whole picture. The person mattered and the relationship ended. There was love and there were limits. There were good memories and there were painful realities. Something was real and something was not sustainable. This is where grief becomes mature. It stops needing to make the person all good or all bad in order to release them. It allows the story to become complex enough to be true. Social connection also affects recovery. After a breakup, isolation can intensify withdrawal because the lost relationship may have been the main source of regulation. Supportive friendships, fan community, community therapy, creative work, movement, and meaningful routine can help the nervous system form new anchors. But this is not just a distraction, it is repatterning. The body needs new rhythms, new people to call, new places to go, new routines in the evening, new ways to regulate stress, new meanings to organize around, new forms of touch, care, safety, and belonging. Reconstruction is not an abstract idea. It happens through repeated embodied life. The person learns, I can wake up without them. I can eat without them. I can sleep without them. I can laugh without them. I can make decisions without them. I can be witnessed by others. I can be held by life in more than one way. At first, this may feel impossible. Then it becomes occasional. Then it becomes more stable. The nervous system begins to build a new map. This is why time helps, but time alone is not always enough. Time creates distance, but what happens in that time matters. If the person spends the time in surveillance, rumination, revenge, avoidance, numbing, or fantasy, the attachment may remain alive. If the person uses time for grief, truth, regulation, support, meaning, boundaries, and self-reconstruction, the bond can gradually become integrated. Healing is not passive waiting. It is an active reorganization. Sometimes that reorganization includes anger. Anger can be part of breakup recovery because it returns energy to the self. It says, that hurt me, that was not acceptable. I deserved honesty. I gave too much, and I will not abandon myself again. Anger can interrupt idealization and help restore boundaries. But anger can also become a prison if it hardens into identity. If the person remains organized around resentment, they may still be bound to the relationship through opposition. They may no longer want the person, but the person still governs their emotional life. The same is true of longing. Longing binds through desire. Resentment binds through injury. Both may need to be felt, but neither should become the final home. Grief must move. It may move through sadness, anger, numbness, confusion, relief, longing, regret, tenderness, humiliation, acceptance, and new life. The process is not neat. It may return in waves. But over time, if metabolized, the pain becomes less commanding. The person stops being the center of reality. The body reaches less often. The future becomes imaginable again. This is identity reconstruction, not becoming who we were before the relationship. That person may no longer exist. The relationship changed us. The breakup changed us. The grief changed us. Reconstruction means becoming someone who can carry the experience without being governed by it. It means asking, what did this relationship teach me about my attachment, my needs, my boundaries, my fantasies, my body, my wounds, my capacity to love, my tendency to lose myself, my fear of being alone, my longing to be chosen, my ability to choose myself? It means reclaiming the parts of the self that were outsourced to the bond. If they were my regulator, how would I rebuild regulation? If they were my future, how do I rebuild direction? If they were my proof of worth, how do I return worth to the self? If they were my witness, where can my story now be held? If they were my identity anchor, who am I without that role? These are not quick questions, but they are the path from heartbreak to reconstruction. At the scientific and psychological layer then, a breakup is much more than sadness. It is attachment withdrawal, neurochemical disruption, grief-based reorganization, identity collapse, future image death, memory reconstruction, and the slow rebuilding of self outside the relational field. The body may continue reaching for the bond long after the mind understands the ending. That does not mean the mind is failing. It means the body is learning at its own pace. Perhaps this is one of the most compassionate truths we can bring to heartbreak. The part of you that misses them is not stupid. The part of you that reaches is not weak. The part of you that aches is not broken. It is the part of you that bonded, expected, imagined, trusted, and organized around love. Now it has to learn a new reality, and that learning is grief. But grief, if held with enough honesty, can become reconstruction. It can take the collapsed relational self and slowly teach it how to stand again, not as the person it was before the bond, but as someone more conscious of what love touched, what love revealed, what love took, and what now has to be reclaimed. The mirror layer. What part of the self was organized around the bond? A breakup not only reveals what we felt for another person, it reveals how much of the self had become organized around the relationship. That is the mirror layer of this episode. Because when a bond ends, the pain is not always only about the person leaving. Sometimes the pain comes from the sudden exposure of everything that had been built around them, the routines, the emotional regulation, the future image, the role, the identity, the version of the self that existed inside the relationship. The parts of us felt more alive, more wanted, more needed, more meaningful, or more secure, because that person was there. This is why a breakup can feel like a collapse of self. The person may be gone, but the deeper question becomes, what did they hold inside me? What did I become through them? What did I project onto them? What part of my identity depended on being seen, chosen, desired, needed, rescued, or validated by them? Because relationships are mirrors, they reflect parts of us to ourselves. Some reflections are beautiful. In love, we may see our tenderness, our humor, our sensuality, our devotion, our capacity to care, our ability to build, our desire to be known, our courage to open, and our longing to create a future. Through another person's eyes, we may meet parts of ourselves that have been hidden, defended, neglected, or waiting. But mirrors can also become anchors. If I only feel desirable when you desire me, then your absence threatens my relationship with my own body. If I only feel safe when you are close, then your distance threatens my ability to regulate. If I only feel meaningful when you need me, then your leaving threatens my purpose. If I only feel chosen when you choose me, then your withdrawal threatens my worth. The relationship becomes more than a connection. It becomes a structure, and when that structure falls, the self has to ask what was being held up by it. The first mirror is the partner as regulator. In a deep bond, another person can become part of how the body settles. Their voice may calm the nervous system. Their message may soften the day. Their touch may bring the breath down. Their presence may reduce anxiety. Their body may become associated with rest, warmth, belonging, desire, comfort, and emotional safety. Even the routine of contact can become regulating, knowing they are there, knowing they will call, knowing they will return, knowing someone is carrying you in their inner world. When that is removed, the body can feel dysregulated. Not because the person was necessarily perfect, but because the nervous system had learned to use their presence as part of its map of safety. Their absence does not register only as sadness. It registers as a loss of regulation. This can make breakups feel physically destabilizing. Sleep may change. Appetite may change. The body may feel restless, heavy, hollow, wired, or exhausted. The nervous system may keep reaching for the old regulator, the voice, the text, the touch, the reassurance, the familiar conflict, even the familiar pattern. It may not yet know how to settle without them. This is why some people return to relationships they know are not good for them. They are not always returning to love. Sometimes they are returning to regulation, or the memory of regulation, or the relief that comes when the attachment alarm temporarily stops. A person who causes anxiety can also become the person who relieves it. That is what makes some bonds so difficult to release. The one who activates the wound may also become the one the body wants for soothing. The nervous system says, contact will calm me, even if the deeper pattern keeps reopening the wound. So the breakup asks, what did this person regulate for me? Did they help me feel safe, wanted, less alone, more desirable, more stable, more alive, less abandoned, less anxious? If they were part of my regulation, how do I begin rebuilding that capacity inside myself and through healthier forms of support? This is not about pretending we should never need people. We are relational beings. Co-regulation is human. We are meant to soothe and be soothed, hold and be held, witness and be witnessed. The problem is not that another person regulated us. The problem is when the self loses all access to regulation without them. Healing does not mean becoming someone who needs nobody. It means becoming someone who can receive love without making one person the only doorway back to the self. The second mirror is the partner as an identity anchor. Relationships often answer questions we do not even realize we are asking. Who am I? Where do I belong? Am I wanted? Am I building something? Do I matter to someone? Am I chosen? Am I lovable? Is my future taking shape? Inside a relationship, those questions may feel temporarily answered. I am their partner. I am loved. I am desired. I am needed. I am building a life. I have someone to tell. I have a person. I belong somewhere. I am no longer alone in the same way. This can be deeply meaningful. There is nothing wrong with relationships shaping identity. Love changes us. Commitment gives form. Being someone's partner can be beautiful. But the danger comes when the identity becomes too dependent on the bond. When the relationship does not simply enrich the self, but becomes the self's central proof of worth, purpose, and direction. Then the breakup feels annihilating. Not only I lost them, but I lost who I was. This is where people can feel strangely blank after a breakup. Their identity had become organized around the relationship, and now the role is gone. The day no longer has the same shape. The future no longer has the same image. The self no longer receives the same reflection. The mind asks, what now? But the deeper question is, who now? Who am I without being their partner? Who am I without being wanted by them? Who am I without the relationship that made my future feel coherent? Who am I when the identity I built around us has dissolved? This can be especially powerful when the relationship represented progress. Perhaps it felt like proof of healing. Proof that love was possible. Proof that the old wounds had finally been overcome. Proof that the person was no longer invisible, abandoned, unwanted, or alone. If the relationship ends, the breakup can feel like more than romantic loss. It can feel like the collapse of the proof. The person may think, maybe I was not healed after all. Maybe I was not chosen after all. Maybe I am back where I started. Maybe the old story was true. This is where heartbreak touches the deeper identity wound. But the ending of a relationship does not prove the old wound was true. Being left does not prove we are unlovable. Being rejected does not prove we are worthless. A future collapsing does not mean we have no future. It means a relational structure has ended, and the self must now be rebuilt around something deeper than being chosen by that person. The third mirror is the partner as witness. This is one of the quietest and most painful layers of breakup grief. When someone has known us intimately, they become a witness to parts of life that no one else may fully hold. They know the private jokes, the ordinary mornings, the vulnerable confessions, the stories behind certain places, the details of family wounds, the way we looked when tired, the version of us that existed in unguarded moments. They may have seen parts of us that were not public. They may have known the language of the relationship, the shared references, the little rituals, the meanings no one else would understand. When the relationship ends, it can feel as though a witness has died. The memories remain, but the shared holder of those memories is no longer accessible in the same way. A song plays, and only you are there to remember what it meant. A place appears, and only you feel the old atmosphere. Something funny happens, and the person you would have told is no longer the person you can tell. The private world still exists inside you, but it no longer has a living exchange. This can feel deeply lonely. Not because there are no other people in life, but because a particular shared reality has lost its other witness. This is part of why old messages and photographs become so charged. They are not only evidence of the person, they are evidence of a world that existed. A world where the self was seen in a certain way. A world where the memory was shared. A world where we meant something. Deleting or keeping those traces can become difficult because the traces hold witness. To delete them may feel like erasing the world. To keep them may keep the wound open. There is no universal rule here. The question is what helps the nervous system integrate rather than remain trapped. The deeper grief is often this: who holds that version of me now? If they were the witness to certain parts of the self, then healing may involve finding new ways to witness those parts. Through writing, through friendship, through therapy, through creative work, through honest reflection, through allowing the self to say that happened. It mattered. I remember. I do not need the other person to keep the memory alive for it to have been real. The fourth mirror is the partner as projection. Sometimes breakups hurt so deeply because we are not only losing who the person was, we are losing what we projected onto them. The future they represented, the healing they promised, the rescue they seemed to offer, the destiny we imagined, the status of being with them, the proof of worth, the fantasy of finally being safe, the version of life we attached to their presence. Projection does not mean the relationship was fake. It means the person carried more meaning than they may have actually been able to hold. They became a screen for hope, longing, fear, identity, and unfinished emotional material. This often becomes visible after the breakup. The person may ask, do I miss them, or do I miss the future I imagined with them? Do I miss who they were, or who I thought they could become? Do I miss the actual relationship, or the fantasy of what it was supposed to heal? Do I miss their presence, or the version of myself that felt possible around them? These questions can be painful because they reveal that part of the grief is internal. We may have to grieve not only the person, but the story we built through them, the marriage that never happened, the family that never formed, the healing that did not arrive, the apology that was never spoken, the transformation that remained potential, the person we hoped they would become. Potential can be harder to grieve than reality. Reality has edges. Potential can keep expanding. It says maybe one day, maybe if they healed, maybe if the timing changed, maybe if they understood, maybe if we tried again, maybe if the better version of them returned. The breakup may not fully end in the mind because the projected version of the person is still alive. The real relationship ended, but the imagined relationship remains emotionally active. This is where integration requires honesty, not cruelty. Not cynicism. Honesty. Who were they actually? What did they actually show? What did I imagine? What did I hope? What did I excuse because the projection was so powerful? What future did I attach to them that now needs to be returned to my own life? A person can be meaningful without being the container for every future we place upon them. A relationship can matter without being the only place our healing can happen. The fact that the projection collapses does not mean the love was worthless. It means the inner meaning has to be reclaimed. The fifth mirror is the breakup as revelation of dependency. Dependency is not always obvious while the relationship is alive. It can hide beneath devotion, care, loyalty, attraction, commitment, or routine. But when the bond breaks, dependency becomes visible. The person may realize how much of their emotional stability, identity, self-worth, daily rhythm, or future image depended on the relationship continuing. This does not mean they were weak. It means the bond had become an organizing structure. But heartbreak asks whether that structure was balanced. Did love become self-abandonment? Did care become overfunctioning? Did devotion become fear of being alone? Did loyalty become tolerance of harm? Did desire become addiction to validation? Did the relationship become the only place I felt real? Did I give this person authority over my worth, future, or emotional state? These questions are not meant to blame the person grieving. Breakups are painful enough without adding self-attack. But if we do not ask them, we may rebuild the same pattern elsewhere. We may seek another person to become the new regulator, the new identity anchor, the new witness, the new projection, the new proof that we are worth loving. That is why ego death can become transformative. The breakup dissolved structure, and in the ruins we can finally see what the structure was made of. Maybe the relationship was love. Maybe it was also dependency. Maybe it was tenderness. Maybe it was also fear. Maybe it was a connection. Maybe it was also a projection. Maybe it was devotion. Maybe it was also self-abandonment. The goal is not to reduce the relationship to pathology. The goal is to see the whole truth clearly enough to rebuild differently. The sixth mirror is the self after the bond. This is the most difficult and most important part of the mirror layer. After the person leaves, after the role dissolves, after the future collapses, after the body stops receiving the old rhythm, the self has to face an unfamiliar question. Who am I when I am no longer reflected through this relationship? At first, the answer may not come. There may only be emptiness, a blank future, a body that still reaches, a mind that still loops, a heart that still refuses to fully accept the new reality. This stage can feel frightening because the old self is gone, but the new self has not arrived. But slowly, identity begins to reform, not by pretending the relationship did not matter, but by reclaiming the parts of the self that became fused with it. If the relationship awakened tenderness, that tenderness still belongs to you. If it awakened sensuality, that sensuality still belongs to you. If it awakened creativity, that creativity still belongs to you. If it awakened the desire to build a future, that desire still belongs to you. If it revealed your capacity to love deeply, that capacity did not leave with them. If it showed you your wound, the wound is now yours to care for. If it showed you your longing, the longing can be listened to without being handed entirely to another person. This is a vital reframing. The person may have been the mirror, but they were not the source of everything the mirror revealed. The love you felt came through you. The devotion came through you. The hope came through you. The desire came through you. The grief comes through you because something in you was alive enough to be touched. That does not make the other person irrelevant. It simply means they do not own everything they awakened. After a breakup, part of the reconstruction is taking back the projected life force. The energy that was organized around them must slowly return to the self. Attention returns. Desire returns. Creativity returns. Future returns. The body begins to belong to itself again. The person becomes part of the story rather than the center of the story. This is not instant. It can take time. There may be days when the old mirror still feels like the only one that mattered. There may be days where the self still longs to be seen by that one person. But healing asks us to build enough inner and outer mirrors that the self does not remain trapped in the reflection of the lost bond. This is where friendship, community, creativity, movement, writing, therapy, solitude, spiritual practice, and honest routine become important. They help rebuild reflection. They remind themselves that it exists outside the relationship. They create new places where the person can be witnessed, not as someone's ex, not as someone abandoned, not as someone broken, but as a living being still becoming. Breakups hurt not only because someone leaves, but because the self must reorganize without the mirror it had become used to. That is the key insight of this section. The partner may have been regulator, identity anchor, witness, projection, role confirmation, future image, or proof of worth. The breakup reveals those attachments. It shows what was held by the bond. And then, slowly, painfully, honestly, it asks the self to reclaim what can be reclaimed, grieve what must be grieved, and rebuild what can no longer depend on the old structure. This is why a breakup can become ego death. The ego loses its relational mirror. The self-image built around being loved, chosen, partnered, desired, needed, or saved dissolves. But beneath that collapse, another possibility begins. A self not built only around being chosen. A self that can love without disappearing. A self that can be witnessed without depending on one person to hold the whole story. A self that can be regulated through relationships but not destroyed by absence. A self that can honor the past without remaining trapped inside it. A self that can say, that bond shaped me, but it is not the only place I exist. Perhaps this is where reconstruction begins. Not in forgetting them, not in denying the pain, not in rushing into a new identity, but in asking with honesty and compassion, what part of me was organized around this bond? And how do I now bring that part home? Cultural and digital conditioning, breakup content, closure loops and digital ghosts. If breakups were already painful before the digital age, modern culture has made them harder to leave behind. Not because people did not grieve before technology. They did. People have always carried letters, photographs, memories, songs, scents, places, shared objects, and the ache of unfinished love. But the digital world has changed the conditions of heartbreak. It has made absence visible. It has made memory searchable. It has made endings less clean. It has made old relationships constantly accessible through messages, photographs, archived conversations, voice notes, social media profiles, location history, playlists, tag posts, and algorithmic reminders that appear when the body is least prepared for them. The relationship may have ended, but the digital traces remain, and those traces can keep the nervous system attached to a relationship that reality has already ended. This is the first layer: digital ghosts. A digital ghost is not only the person, it is the residue of the bond still living inside the machine. Their name in the phone, their old messages, their photographs, their voice note, the route you took to see them, the playlist you shared, the screenshot you kept, the tagged image, the memory that appears 1 year later without warning, the chat thread that still contains the language of a world that no longer exists. These traces can feel strangely alive because they hold the old rhythm. A message thread is not only text, it is a timeline of intimacy, the early excitement, the flirtation, the first confession, the conflict, the repair, the private jokes, the emotional dependency, the late night vulnerability, the words that once regulated the body, the moments where the future still seemed open. When someone rereads those messages after a breakup, they are not only reading information, they are re-entering a state. The body may feel the old attachment again, the old hope, the old ache, the old desire, the old confusion, the old world. That is why digital traces can be so difficult. They are archives, but they are also portals. They can help memory feel honored, but they can also keep grief open. They can preserve what mattered, but they can also keep the nervous system from learning that the relationship is no longer active. Every reread can become a form of contact. Every photo can become a small reunion. Every voice note can bring back the person's presence enough to soothe and wound at the same time. There is no universal rule about deleting or keeping. Some people need to remove everything immediately because the traces are too activating. Others need time before they can let go of the archive. Some keep a few things as part of integration, while removing the material that keeps them looping. The point is not to perform detachment. The point is to ask honestly, does this trace help me integrate, or does it keep me emotionally suspended? That question matters because digital culture can keep the dead relationship alive. The second layer is social media surveillance. After a breakup, people often say they do not want to know what the other person is doing, but the access is there. The profile exists, the stories appear, the mutual post, the X is online, the new photograph appears, the follow account changes, a new name shows up, a location suggests something, a song is shared that seems to mean something, a quote appears that feels directed. A person who once belonged to the private world is suddenly visible as a public signal. The nervous system begins watching. Have they moved on? Do they look happy? Are they hurting? Are they pretending? Who liked that photo? Who are they with? Why are they active but not speaking? Who is that person in the background? Was that post meant for me? Are they trying to show me something? Have they replaced me? This kind of checking can feel like seeking truth, but often it becomes another attachment loop. The body wants contact, but direct contact may not be possible or wise. So surveillance becomes indirect contact. Looking becomes a way of touching the old bond without openly returning to it. But each check usually reactivates the wound. If they look sad, hope returns. If they look happy, grief and humiliation intensify. If they post nothing, the mind imagines. If they post something ambiguous, the mind decodes. If they appear with someone new, the body may collapse. If they watch your story, the attachment system wakes up. If they do not, abandonment returns. The person becomes trapped in a cycle where every piece of information becomes meaningful, and every absence of information becomes meaningful too. This is the cruel logic of post-breakup surveillance. The mind can turn anything into evidence. This is why social media can slow grief. Grief requires the body to learn absence, but surveillance keeps providing partial presence. The person is gone, but not gone. Unavailable, but visible. Silent, but traceable. No longer a partner, but still an object in the nervous system's field. The breakup cannot fully become real because the digital world keeps offering fragments of the old reality. The third layer is closure loops. Closure culture tells people they need answers. One last conversation. One final message. One explanation. One apology. One confession. One moment where the person finally says the thing that allows the nervous system to rest. Sometimes closure conversations do help. Sometimes honest dialogue matters. Sometimes an apology opens space. Sometimes two people can end with respect. But many breakups do not offer that. Some people leave without clarity. Some lie. Some avoid responsibility. Some do not understand themselves well enough to explain. Some give partial truths. Some rewrite history to protect their ego. Some offer an answer that creates more questions. Some disappear, return, disappear again, and keep the loop open. The internet often promises that closure can be achieved through the right method. Send this message, go no contact, write a letter, block them, wait 30 days, manifest detachment, get revenge by glowing up, analyze their attachment style, classify them as narcissists, understand their trauma, decode the breakup, and find the lesson. Some of this advice can be useful, but it can also keep the person in constant analysis. The breakup becomes a problem to solve rather than a grief to feel. The person keeps searching for the right frame, the right label, the right strategy, the right interpretation that will finally stop the pain. But the nervous system does not always need more content. Sometimes it needs a rest from content. Sometimes the search for closure becomes the thing preventing closure. This is especially true when people consume endless breakup analysis, avoidant attachment videos, anxious attachment videos, narcissist recovery content, twin flame separation content, red pill explanations, they will regret losing you videos, no contact success stories, manifestation content, revenge glow up advice, and psychological breakdowns of ex behavior. Any one of these may contain insight, but in excess, they can keep the ex at the center of consciousness. The person may no longer be in the relationship, but the mind is still relating to them through analysis. That is not always healing. Sometimes it is attachment in intellectual form. Closure may eventually require accepting that the perfect explanation will not arrive, that the other person may never become accountable, that some endings remain incomplete, that the nervous system has to learn how to live without the unresolved loop, not because the questions were unimportant, but because life cannot remain organized around someone else's inability to answer them. The fourth layer is breakup advice culture. Modern breakup content can be helpful because it gives people language for what they are experiencing. It helps them understand attachment, grief, trauma bonds, betrayal, boundaries, no contact, emotional abuse, self-worth, nervous system regulation, and the difference between missing someone and needing to return. For people who have felt alone or confused, that language can be validating. But the danger is that advice culture can become identity culture. Someone is no longer just grieving. They are now an anxious attachment type healing from an avoidant, or an empath recovering from a narcissist, or a divine feminine waiting for a divine masculine, or a high-value person refusing low-value treatment, or someone doing no contact to make the ex miss them, or someone posting an empowered version of themselves while still privately collapsing. Some of these frames may contain truth, but if they become too rigid, they can replace genuine grief with a script. The person may stop feeling the complexity of the relationship and start performing the identity that the content gives them. They may be encouraged to see the ex only as a villain, themselves only as victim, the breakup only as a betrayal, the future only as revenge, and healing only as superiority. This can be useful in the early stages if someone needs to break through denial. But if it becomes permanent, it can harden the heart. It can turn grief into ideology. It can prevent nuance. It can make people mistake bitterness for healing, detachment for superiority, and performative empowerment for actual integration. Healing is not always looking unbothered. Sometimes healing is admitting how much it hurts without letting the hurt define you. Sometimes healing is seeing your part without blaming yourself for everything. Sometimes healing is recognizing harm without needing to dehumanize the person. Sometimes healing is letting the story become complex enough to be true. The fifth layer is public grief and performance. Social media has created a strange pressure around breakups. People feel watched even when no one is watching closely. They may feel the need to appear fine, to post the right image, to show that they are moving on, to look attractive, empowered, desirable, busy, glowing, independent, and unbothered. They may want the ex to see them thriving. They may want mutual friends to believe they are strong. They may want to reclaim pride. Again, this is human. After heartbreak, dignity matters. Nobody wants to feel publicly humiliated, but the performance of healing can split the self. Publicly, the person is fine. Privately, the body is still aching. Publicly, they are glowing. Privately, they are checking the ex's profile. Publicly, they have moved on. Privately, they still sleep badly. Publicly, they say they do not care. Privately, they still want the message. That split can slow true integration because the person begins managing the image of healing rather than allowing healing to occur. There is also the performance of pain. Some people post quotes, songs, indirect messages, cryptic stories, or emotional signals that keep the breakup publicly alive. This can be a way of seeking witness. It can also be a way of maintaining connection through indirect communication. Instead of speaking directly, the person speaks into the feed and hopes the ex understands. This keeps the relational field activated. The relationship is over, but the performance continues. The sixth layer is digital replacement anxiety. One of the most painful post-breakup experiences is seeing the ex with someone new. Before the digital age, this might have happened through rumor, chance encounter, or mutual social circles. Now it can appear through a photograph, a tagged post, a story, a profile change, a comment, a follow, a soft launch, a public sign that the person who once belonged to your private world is now building a world with someone else. This can be devastating because it collapses the remaining fantasy. Maybe they were grieving too. Maybe they would come back. Maybe the bond was irreplaceable. Maybe the silence meant they were processing. Maybe what we had was too meaningful to move beyond quickly. Then the image appears, and the body has to confront a new reality. They may be choosing someone else. They may be creating new memories. They may be giving attention, touch, desire, and future to another person. This not only creates jealousy, it can create identity collapse. The person may feel replaced not only in the relationship but in the story. Someone else is now occupying the role they had. Someone else is receiving the attention. Someone else is becoming the witness. Someone else is standing in the future that once belonged to them. That pain can feel humiliating. It can also reignite comparison. What do they have that I do not? Are they better? Were they the real choice? Was I only temporary? Did I mean less than I thought? This is where digital culture can be cruel. It can deliver the image before the body is ready. It can make replacement visible. It can make grief public. It can force the nervous system to process what it might have been healthier not to see. This is why digital boundaries are not childish. Muting, unfollowing, blocking, archiving, deleting, or taking space can be acts of nervous system care, not revenge, not immaturity, care. The body cannot heal while being repeatedly exposed to the wound as spectacle. The deeper lesson of this section is that modern breakups require digital hygiene. That may sound clinical, but it matters. If the relationship has ended, the digital environment may need to change so the body can learn the ending. The old thread may need to be archived. Photos may need to be moved. Notifications may need to be silenced. Profiles may need to be muted. Mutual content may need boundaries. The nervous system may need fewer openings through which the old bond keeps re-entering. This does not mean erasing history. It means creating enough space for grief to become integration, instead of constant reactivation. Because the dead relationship can remain digitally alive for a long time if we keep feeding it. Through checking, through rereading, through decoding, through indirect posts, through content loops, through surveillance, through comparison, through waiting for signs. At some point, healing may ask a difficult question: am I grieving the relationship, or am I keeping it alive through digital contact with its ghost? That question is not meant to shame. It is meant to return power. Because if the digital field keeps reopening the wound, then part of reconstruction may involve closing some doors. Not forever necessarily, not with hatred, but with enough clarity to let the body learn absence. The cultural and digital layer of breakups shows us that endings now happen in an environment full of traces, advice, visibility, performance, and constant access. The breakup is no longer only between two people. It is surrounded by platforms that can intensify longing, comparison, humiliation, analysis, and the fantasy of return. So conscious heartbreak asks us to become careful with what we keep looking at, careful with what we let the algorithm feed us, careful with the stories that turn grief into obsession, careful with the profiles that keep the body reaching, careful with the content that makes bitterness feel like healing or waiting feel like destiny, because digital culture can keep the dead relationship alive through access, surveillance, memory, and endless interpretation. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for the self after a breakup is not to know more. It is to stop re-entering the world that has already ended long enough for a new one to begin. The phenomenological and spiritual layer, ego death, initiation and identity reconstruction after looking at attachment withdrawal, grief, identity disruption, digital ghosts, closure loops, and the way modern culture can keep a dead relationship artificially alive. We arrive at the deeper symbolic layer of the breakup, the layer where the ending is not only emotional, it becomes existential. Because sometimes a breakup does not feel like sadness, it feels like a death. Not the death of the body, but the death of a self. The self that existed inside the relationship. The self that had a future. The self that was chosen by that person. The self that was known by them. The self that organized its days, imagination, identity, body rhythm, and emotional world around the bond. When that self collapses, the pain can feel almost impossible to explain to someone who has not experienced it. From the outside, it may look like the loss of a partner. From the inside, it can feel like the loss of reality itself. The old structure is gone, but the new structure has not formed. The person is still alive, but no longer accessible in the same way. The future has not literally died, but the future image that the heart had already entered has disappeared. The body is still breathing, but part of the inner world feels like it has gone silent. This is why the phrase ego death matters here. By ego death, I do not mean something abstract, glamorous, or spiritually romantic. I do not mean a dramatic transformation where pain instantly becomes wisdom. I mean the collapse of an identity structure, the breakdown of the self-image that was built around being loved, chosen, partnered, desired, needed, understood, saved, or seen through that relationship. The ego is the organized sense of me. It is the story that says, this is who I am, this is where I belong, this is who I matter to, this is the future I am moving towards, this is the role I play, this is the version of myself that makes sense. In love, that ego can become relational. The self is no longer only me. It becomes me with you, me as your partner, me as part of us, me inside this future. When the relationship ends, that structure is shaken, and if the bond was central enough, it may not simply shake, it may dissolve. This is the ego death of a breakup. The person not only loses the other, they lose the organizing story that made life feel coherent. The mind may keep trying to return to the old structure because the unknown feels unbearable. It may replay the past, search for blame, seek signs, imagine reunion, or turn the breakup into a narrative where the old self can somehow be restored. But sometimes the old self cannot be restored. Sometimes it has to die. That sounds harsh, but there can be mercy inside it. Because not every self built inside a relationship was free. Sometimes the self that dies was the self that over-adapted, the self that was chosen, the self that abandoned its own needs to maintain the bond, the self that became addicted to another person's attention, the self that outsourced worth to being wanted, the self that confused being needed with being loved, the self that could only imagine a future if someone else was holding it. A breakup may feel like destruction, but it can also reveal where the old identity was too dependent on the bond to survive without it. That does not make the pain less real. It makes the pain more meaningful. The second layer is the death of the relational self. Every relationship creates a version of us. Not a fake version necessarily, but a relational version. We speak differently with different people. We feel different in different bonds. We become softer with one person, sharper with another, more playful with someone, more guarded with someone else. Love creates a field, and inside that field a certain self appears. In a deep romantic relationship, that self can become very specific. The self who knew the private language. The self who was touched in a certain way. The self who planned the shared life. The self who held the other person's stories. The self who was witnessed at night, in ordinary clothes, in tiredness, in vulnerability, in the mundane reality of being human. The self who belonged to the private world of the relationship. When the bond ends, that relational self has nowhere to go. This can be one of the strangest griefs. The person may still exist as an individual, but the version of them that existed with the other person is gone. There is no one to receive that particular humor, that particular softness, that particular ritual, that particular language, that particular body memory. A whole relational self becomes homeless. That is why breakup grief can feel so disorientating. We may not only ask, where did they go? We may ask, where did I go? Where did the me who loved them go? Where did the me who felt desired go? Where did the me who had that future go? Where did the me who was seen by them go? Where did the me who lived inside that private world go? The answer is not simple. That self does not disappear completely. It becomes unanchored. It needs to be integrated back into the wider self. The tenderness that appeared with them has to be reclaimed. The desire that opened with them has to be brought home. The confidence that came from being loved has to be rebuilt internally. The future energy that was placed inside the relationship has to be slowly redirected into life. This is the beginning of identity reconstruction. But before reconstruction comes the void. The void after loss is the space between the old self and the new self. It can feel empty, frightening, blank, and meaningless. The old relationship no longer gives structure, but nothing has replaced it yet. The day feels too open. The evening feels too quiet. The body does not know where to send its longing. The mind does not know what future to imagine. The heart does not know what to do with love that has no destination. This void is often where people panic. They may try to fill it immediately with another person, another distraction, another ideology, another self-improvement mission, another round of analysis, another attempt to get the ex back, another performance of being healed, another digital loop. Anything to avoid the emptiness. But the void is not always an enemy. Sometimes it is the space where the old identity has dissolved enough for the truth to surface. The void asks, who are you without this bond? What remains when the role is gone? What do you feel when no one reflects you in the old way? What parts of yourself did you abandon to keep the relationship alive? What future was truly yours, and what future was built around being chosen by them? What do you want now that the old story has collapsed? These are painful questions, but they are also initiatory questions. A breakup becomes initiation when the pain is not bypassed, numbed, performed, or turned into revenge, but entered consciously, not in a masochistic way, not by worshipping suffering, but by allowing the ending to reveal what the relationship had been holding. An initiation is a passage. It is not just a wound. It is an ordeal that moves someone from one identity to another. In older cultures, initiations often involved symbolic death and rebirth. The old self is stripped away, the person enters uncertainty, then returns changed. A breakup can carry a similar pattern psychologically. The old relational identity dies. The person experiences grief, confusion, and disorientation. Then slowly, if the pain is metabolized, a new self begins to form. But there is a difference between initiation and collapse. Collapse is what happens when the nervous system falls into defeat. The body shuts down. The future disappears. The self feels powerless. The pain becomes total. There is no meaning yet, only overwhelm. Collapse may be part of grief. It may come in waves. It should not be shamed. Sometimes the body cannot rise immediately because it is carrying too much. Surrender is different. Surrender is not giving up on life. It is the conscious acceptance of what cannot be controlled. It is the moment when the body and heart slowly begin to stop fighting reality. Not because reality is painless. Not because the ending is wanted. But because the struggle to force the old world back into existence is creating more suffering. Collapse says, I cannot survive this. Surrender says, this is happening and I must learn how to live inside what is true. Collapse closes the body. Surrender softens around reality. Collapse is defeat. Surrender is the beginning of participation in healing. Moving from collapse to surrender can take time. It cannot be forced with slogans. No one can simply tell themselves, I surrender and be done. The body has to grieve its way there. It has to cry, rage, sleep, shake, remember, resist, hope, deny, accept, and then resist again. Surrender is not a single moment. It is a repeated practice of returning to what is real. They are gone. The relationship has changed. The old future is no longer available. I cannot make someone choose what they are not choosing. I cannot force closure from someone unable to give it. I cannot keep abandoning myself to keep a dead bond alive. This truth hurts. And still I am here. That is the movement from collapse into surrender. Then grief can begin to become alchemy. Grief as alchemy does not mean turning pain into wisdom too quickly. It does not mean making a beautiful quote out of something that still feels like a wound. It does not mean pretending the breakup was a gift when the body is still in withdrawal. Alchemy in this context means metabolization. The pain is not denied, but it is also not allowed to remain raw forever. It is slowly processed into consciousness, boundaries, self-knowledge, compassion, strength, humility, and new life. Unmet grief often becomes distorted. It can become cynicism. Love is pointless. People always leave. Never trust anyone. It can become ideology. All men are this. All women are that. Relationships are just power games. It can become revenge. I will make them regret losing me. It can become numbing. I will never feel that again. It can become repetitive. I will find someone else quickly so I do not have to feel the void. It can become spiritual bypassing. This was all meant to happen, so I do not need to grieve. But metabolized grief becomes different. It becomes depth. It becomes tenderness without naivety. It becomes discernment without bitterness. It becomes the ability to love again without handing away the whole self. It becomes a more honest understanding of attachment, fantasy, need, boundary, body, identity, and projection. It becomes the knowledge that love can change us without owning us forever. This is where reconstruction begins. Reconstruction is not about returning to who you were before the relationship. That person may no longer exist. The relationship altered you. The breakup altered you. The grief altered you. The goal is not to go backwards, but to build a self that includes what happened without being governed by it. Reconstruction begins in small embodied ways. A new morning rhythm, a room rearranged, a walk taken at the time you used to call them, a meal cooked for yourself, bedding changed, a song reclaimed, a place revisited with someone safe, the phone was put down, the body moved, the future imagined in fragments, a conversation with a friend, a page written, a boundary kept, a night survived without reaching out. These things may sound ordinary, but they are not small to the nervous system. They are evidence. Evidence that life can continue. Evidence that the body can learn absence. Evidence that the self can form new rhythms. Evidence that the world did not end, even though one world did. The self is rebuilt through evidence, not only insight. Insight helps, but the nervous system needs live proof. It needs to experience itself functioning without the old bond. It needs to feel moments of calm, not connected to the ex. It needs to find laughter that does not require them. It needs to discover desire that does not belong to them. It needs to build identity through repeated acts of returning to life. Reconstruction also requires reclaiming meaning. After a breakup, meaning can feel trapped in the past. The person may believe that the most meaningful future was the one that died. Everything else can feel like a lesser version of life. That is understandable. When the heart has invested deeply in one path, another path can initially feel like failure. But meaning is not dead because one future died. It is hidden. It has to be found again. Sometimes through creativity, sometimes through work, sometimes through friendship, sometimes through spiritual practice, sometimes through serving others, sometimes through the body, sometimes through solitude, sometimes through therapy, sometimes through returning to old dreams that were neglected inside the relationship, sometimes through discovering completely new ones. Identity reconstruction asks, what wants to live now? Not what can replace the person. Replacement is not reconstruction. Replacement often avoids the void. Reconstruction asks what parts of the self were waiting beneath the relationship. What parts became quiet? What parts were overused? What parts were abandoned? What parts need strengthening? What parts need rest? What parts need expression? Maybe the breakup reveals that you were always the caretaker and now need to learn to receive. Maybe it reveals that you were always pursuing and now need to learn to stop chasing. Maybe it reveals that you were always adapting and now need to learn what you actually want. Maybe it reveals that you were afraid to be alone and now need to build a relationship with solitude. Maybe it reveals that you placed your future inside another person and now need to reclaim authorship. This is why the breakup can become a doorway to self-knowledge. Not because the loss was good, but because loss reveals structure. When the structure collapses, you can finally see what was holding what. You can see where love was real. You can see where dependency lived. You can see where projection operated. You can see where fear was hidden. You can see where your body ignored itself. You can see where your boundaries were unclear. You can see where your inner child was still waiting to be chosen. This can be painful, but it can also become liberating, because what is seen can be integrated. What remains unconscious repeats. What becomes conscious can be carried differently. The spiritual layer of breakups asks us to hold two truths at once. First, the loss matters. We should not rush past it. We should not turn grief into a motivational performance. We should not pretend the person did not shape us. We should not spiritualize away the ache. The bond was real in the body, and the grief deserves dignity. Second, the loss is not the whole of who we are. The relationship may have ended, but the self is not over. The future image may have died, but future itself has not died. The relational self may have collapsed, but something else can be rebuilt from what remains. This is the paradox of breakup as ego death. Something dies and something survives. At first, the surviving part may feel tiny, barely there, a quiet breath under the collapse, but it is there, the part that watches the grief, the part that can say, I am hurting, the part that can ask for help, the part that can notice the body, the part that can choose not to send the message, the part that can take one step, the part that can endure one more night, the part that can slowly begin to rebuild. That part is the seed of reconstruction, not the old self, not the relationship self, the next self, a self with more truth, a self with more boundaries, a self with more compassion for the body, a self that knows love can be beautiful and still not be enough, a self that knows grief does not have to become identity, a self that knows it can be broken open without staying broken. This is not quick, it is not clean, it is not linear. Ego death is not a polished spiritual event. It may look like crying on the floor, checking the phone, making mistakes, deleting messages, putting them back, feeling strong, then collapsing again. It may look like surviving in fragments before meaning returns. But if the grief is held honestly, if the body is supported, if the digital ghosts are not constantly fed, if the self is allowed to feel what died and slowly ask what wants to live, then the breakup can become more than an ending. It can become a threshold, a painful one, a reluctant one, a threshold no one would choose lightly, but still a threshold. The ego that was built around the bond dissolves, the relational self dies, the void opens, collapse slowly becomes surrender, grief becomes alchemy. Reconstruction begins through body, routine, true truth, boundary, creativity, and new meaning, and eventually the person may be able to say, I did not simply get over them. I became someone else through the process of releasing who I was with them. Personal reflection, the death of a relational self. When I think about breakups, I think the reason they hurt so much is because we do not only lose the person, we lose the rhythm of who we were with them. The body has to learn absence. The mind has to stop reaching for answers that may never arrive. The identity has to learn separation. The future has to be rewritten, and sometimes the hardest part is not only missing them, but realizing how much of the self had become organized around the bond. Loss is not only a thought, it lands in the nervous system. It can reopen abandonment, unworthiness, not being chosen, emotional unsafety, and the younger parts of us that still ache for someone to stay. That is why heartbreak can feel disproportionate from the outside. People may say, just move on, but the body is not only moving on from a person, it is moving on from routine, touch, expectation, future identity, and the version of itself that existed inside that relationship. For me, the deeper question after a breakup is not simply, how do I get over them? It is, what part of me was living through them? Was it my sense of being chosen, my future, my worth, my safety, my proof that I was lovable, my hope that an old wound had finally been healed? A breakup can feel like destruction because something real does die. But perhaps not everything that dies was meant to remain in that form. Sometimes the relational self collapses so the deeper self can begin to return. Not quickly, not neatly, but honestly. Maybe healing begins when we stop to become who we were before the bond, and begin asking who we are becoming after it. Observation practice. What version of me died with this bond? For this episode, the practice is to choose one breakup, ending, or relational rupture that still carries emotional charge. It does not have to be recent. It may be a relationship, a situationship, a friendship, a family bond, or any connection where the ending changed how you saw yourself. Bring that bond to mind gently and ask, what exactly did I lose? Was it the person or the future I imagined with them? Was it the daily rhythm, the messages, the body memory, the intimacy, the shared places, the private language, the sense of being chosen, the feeling of being wanted, or the role I played in their life? Then ask, what version of me existed inside that bond? Was I the partner, the rescuer, the caretaker, the desired one, the safe one, the one trying to prove worth, the one waiting to be chosen, the one building a future, the one hoping love would finally heal something old? Notice whether any part of you is still trying to live inside a relationship that has ended. Is part of your body still waiting for the message? Is part of your mind still searching for the explanation? Is part of your identity still organized around who you were with them? This practice is not about forcing closure. It is not about pretending the bond did not matter, or that you should already be over it. It is about identifying what actually died, what still needs grief, and what part of the self may need to be reclaimed. So ask, what did this ending reveal? What part of me was outsourced to the bond? What part of me is still trapped in the old future? And what part of me is trying, quietly, to be born after the loss? Because sometimes healing begins when we stop asking only who left, and begin asking who we are becoming now that the old relational self has dissolved. Integration from ego death to alchemical love. So this is where episode 14 brings us. Breakups are not only emotional endings. They are nervous system ruptures, identity disruptions, grief events, and symbolic deaths of the relational self. A breakup may hurt because the person is gone, but also because the world built around them has collapsed. The future image dies. The body loses rhythm. The ego loses a role. The self loses the mirror it had become used to. The nervous system has to learn absence. The heart has to hold love that no longer has the same place to go. The mind has to stop trying to solve every unanswered question as if the perfect explanation could reverse the ending. This is why heartbreak can feel so much deeper than missing someone. It can feel like the collapse of a structure made of messages, touch, plans, rituals, identity, desire, witness, future, memory, and expectation. The relationship may have been imperfect. It may even have been painful. But if the body bonded, if the self became organized around the relationship, then its ending requires more than emotional acceptance. It requires reconstruction. The old frame says, I just need to get over them. The deeper frame says, I need to understand what part of me was organized around this bond. The old frame says, closure means they explain everything. The deeper frame says, closure may mean learning to live without the unresolved loop. The old frame says, the breakup destroyed me. The deeper frame says, the breakup dissolved a version of me that now needs integration and reconstruction. The old frame says, if I still miss them, I have not healed. The deeper frame says, missing someone can be part of integration, not proof of failure. These reframes matter because grief is not always evidence that we are stuck. Sometimes grief is the process of becoming unstuck. It is the body learning that the old rhythm is no longer available. It is the heart metabolizing what was real. It is the ego grieving the identity it played inside the relationship. It is the psyche reclaiming the projections, fantasies, hopes, and future images that were placed inside another person. Healing does not always mean forgetting. It does not mean becoming unaffected. It does not mean pretending the bond did not matter. Healing may mean being able to remember without collapsing, to grieve without returning, to love without obeying the old attachment, to honor what was real without remaining imprisoned by what is gone. And this is where the episode begins to open into the final movement of the series. If episode 14 explored the collapse of the relational self, episode 15 becomes the final integration of everything we have explored. What love becomes after attraction, projection, chemistry, digital distortion, shadow, jealousy, rupture, grief, and identity reconstruction have been seen more consciously. Because the whole arc of this series has been moving towards a deeper question. What is love when it is no longer only instinct, performance, projection, possession, chemistry, fantasy, or wound repetition? What becomes possible when love is not used to complete an unfinished self, but becomes a field where two people can reveal, regulate, challenge, mirror, and transform one another without disappearing into the bond? In episode 15, we move into the alchemy of love, relational consciousness, and the future of connection. Breakups hurt because they do not only remove a person, they remove a rhythm, a mirror, a role, a future, and sometimes an entire version of the self. The body has to learn absence. The mind has to stop reaching for answers that may never arrive. The ego has to grieve the role it played. The heart has to hold what was real without being imprisoned by what is gone. None of that happens instantly. There may be days where you understand the ending and still miss the person. Days where you know the relationship could not continue, but the body still reaches. Days where you feel stronger than a song, a place, a photograph, a dream, or a memory pulls you back into the old world. That does not mean you are failing. It may simply mean the body is learning, layer by layer, that a reality it once lived inside is no longer there. So much of heartbreak is the slow return of the self from the bond, the return of attention, the return of breath, the return of desire, the return of future, the return of the parts of you that became attached to being seen, chosen, needed, held, rescued, desired, or completed by another person. Perhaps the most painful truth is also the most freeing. The person may have awakened something in you, but they do not own everything they awakened. The love came through you. The tenderness came through you. The hope came through you. The devotion came through you. The capacity to imagine, build, desire, care, and feel deeply did not disappear with them. It may be buried under grief for a while, but it is still yours to reclaim. So to close this episode, I leave you with this. Perhaps the real question is not, how do I get over them? Perhaps the deeper question is, what version of me was built around this bond? What future died here? What identity collapsed? What rhythm is my body still searching for? What part of me is grieving the person, and what part of me is grieving who I was with them? Can I honor the love without remaining trapped in the loss? Can I grieve without turning grief into identity? Can I release the fantasy without denying what was real? Can I let the ending become a place where something in me is not destroyed, but remade? Because a breakup may feel like the death of the self that loved, hoped, planned, waited, and belonged inside that relationship. But beneath that collapse, another self may be forming. Not the self you were before. Not the self you performed to keep the bond. Not the self that needed the relationship to prove its worth. But a self with more truth, more boundaries, more tenderness, more discernment, more capacity to love without disappearing. Until next time, thank you for joining me today. You've been listening to The Resonance Between Us, episode 14, Breakups as Ego Death, Loss, Withdrawal, and Identity Reconstruction. I'm James Miller.